The night my own son locked me out of my bedroom was the night I decided he would never see a penny of my estate. I stood there in my nightgown, hand trembling on the doorknob, listening to Derek laugh with his wife on the other side of the door that had my late husband's name still etched on the brass plate. My bedroom. In my house, the house I had paid off 20 years ago. Mom, just take the couch tonight, we need the space. His voice carried through the door, not even bothering to lower it. It's just for a few nights until we sort things out. Sort things out? As if my home of 43 years was suddenly up for negotiation. As if I was a house guest overstaying my welcome, rather than the woman who had changed his diapers, nursed him through chickenpox, and paid for his college education. I shuffled down the hallway, past the family photos that chronicled our lives: Derek's graduation, his wedding, the birth of my grandchildren. My hand grazed the wall to steady myself, arthritis making my knees ache with each step. The same knees that had knelt beside his bed during nightmares, that had crouched to his level to bandage scraped elbows. The living room couch was cold leather, nothing like my warm bed with the memory foam mattress that helped my back. I spread the thin throw blanket over myself, not bothering to wipe away the tears that slid down my cheeks. 72 years old, and my son had relegated me to the couch like an unwanted pet. It hadn't always been this way. After Harold passed away 3 years ago, I lived alone comfortably in our ranch-style home. I managed just fine, kept a beautiful garden, volunteered at the library twice a week, hosted bridge club every Thursday. I had a life. Independence. Then came my fall in January. Nothing serious, a slight fracture in my wrist from slipping on ice while getting the mail. But Derek and his wife Melanie had acted like I'd had a brush with death. Mom, you can't live alone anymore, Derek had insisted during one of his rare visits to the hospital. What if you had hit your head? What if you couldn't reach the phone? I've lived alone for 3 years without incident, I'd replied, but he'd already been texting on his phone, barely listening. 2 weeks later, they arrived with suitcases. We're moving in to help you, Derek announced, as if bestowing a tremendous gift. Melanie can work remotely, and the kids will love having more space than our apartment. I should have protested more forcefully then. Should have seen the gleam in Melanie's eyes as she wandered through my home, already mentally redecorating. But I'd been raised to be accommodating, to put family first, and a small, lonely part of me had been touched by what I thought was concern. The first changes were subtle. My knitting basket moved from beside the couch to a closet because it cluttered the living space. The walls in the guest room, now the children's room, were painted without asking me. My carefully tended garden was simplified by removing my beloved roses because the thorns were a hazard for the children. Then came the dinner, where they casually mentioned selling my car. You hardly drive anymore, Mom, Derek said, spearing a piece of chicken I had cooked. And we need the garage space for our SUV. I drive to the library twice a week, to the grocery store, to church, I countered, feeling my independence slipping away 1 inch at a time. We can take you to those places, Melanie offered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Besides, your eyesight isn't what it used to be. My eyesight was fine. I just had it checked. But the car was gone the following week while I was at my bridge game. They'd sold it without my permission, leaving me stranded at the community center until a friend drove me home. The changes accelerated after that. My checkbook disappeared to help organize your finances. My friend's visits were discouraged. You seem tired after company. Mom. My sister's calls were screened. Aunt Linda just upsets you with her negativity. I became a ghost in my own home, retreating to my bedroom where I could still maintain some semblance of control over my surroundings. Until tonight, when even that sanctuary had been taken. As I lay on the couch, listening to the strange sounds of my house at night from this unfamiliar vantage point, I thought about Harold. My practical, forward-thinking husband who had insisted we meet with an estate lawyer after his diagnosis, who had made sure everything was in order. "The house and everything else goes to you, Eleanor," he had said, holding my hand in the lawyer's office. "And then to Derek when the time comes. Family takes care of family. Family takes care of family." The words echoed in my mind as I pulled the inadequate blanket tighter around my shoulders. Morning came with the chaos of grandchildren preparing for school. I folded the blanket neatly and tucked it behind a cushion, not wanting to be seen as the pitiable grandmother sleeping on the couch. My back ached as I stood, a sharp reminder of my displacement. "Morning, Mom," Derek said, breezing through with a travel mug of coffee. My coffee, from the expensive beans I ordered specially. "Sleep okay?" "Why was I locked out of my bedroom?" I asked directly, my voice steadier than I expected. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Melanie's sister is visiting this weekend and needs a place to sleep. We figured you wouldn't mind taking the couch for a few nights." "You figured wrong," I said quietly. "That is my bedroom, in my house." Derek's face changed then, the mask of concerned son slipping to reveal something harder. "Mom, we're trying to help you. You're not as young as you used to be, and this house is too much for you to manage. I was managing fine before you arrived." "You fell and broke your wrist," he snapped. "If we hadn't moved in, who knows what could have happened next?" "I broke my wrist, not my mind," I replied, feeling a strength I hadn't experienced in months. "And this arrangement isn't working." Before he could respond, Melanie swept in, already dressed for her remote workday in a crisp blouse paired with yoga pants. "Derek, Aiden can't find his science project. Can you help him before the bus comes?" She turned to me with a tight smile. "Eleanor, we're out of coffee creamer. Would you mind picking some up today? You can use the grocery money from the kitchen jar." The kitchen jar, my household budget, previously managed through my own checking account, now doled out to me in cash like an allowance for a child. "Actually," I said, "I have an appointment this morning." "An appointment?" Melanie exchanged a glance with Derek. "With who? I don't have anything on the calendar." The calendar. My schedule tracked and managed as if I were an irrational being incapable of remembering my own commitments. "It's personal," I replied, enjoying the flicker of uncertainty that crossed her face. "I've called a taxi." "A taxi?" Derek looked up from where he was helping Aiden pack his backpack. "Mom, that's expensive. I can drive you." "No need," I said, gathering my handbag and the light jacket I kept hanging by the door. "I've already arranged it." The truth was, I had no appointment. But as the yellow taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying me away from the house that no longer felt like home, I made a decision. I directed the driver to take me downtown, to the offices of Maxwell and Brewer, attorneys at law. "I need to speak with someone about changing my will," I told the receptionist, a young woman who smiled at me with genuine warmth. "Mr. Brewer has an opening at 11, she said after checking the computer. "Would that work for you?" It would. I sat in the waiting area, my mind clearer than it had been in months. I was 72, not 92. I wasn't dying or incapacitated. I had allowed my guilt over Harold's death, my moments of loneliness, to cloud my judgment, had allowed my son to make me doubt my own capabilities. "Mrs. Harrison," the receptionist called. "Mr. Brewer will see you now." The attorney's office was warm and welcoming, with comfortable chairs and diplomas tastefully arranged on the walls. George Brewer himself was perhaps 60, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Harrison?" he asked after we were seated. "I need to change my will," I said simply, "and I may need other advice as well." "I see," he said, making a note. "Is there a specific change you're considering?" "I want to remove my son as the beneficiary of my estate," I said, the words sending a mixture of pain and resolve through me. "And I need to understand my rights regarding my home. which I currently own outright but where my son and his family have moved in, uninvited. George Brewer's eyebrows rose slightly, but his tone remained professional. Let's start with understanding your current situation in more detail, he suggested, pulling out a legal pad. For the next hour, I outlined the events of the past few months, the gradual erosion of my independence, the subtle and not so subtle ways my autonomy had been stripped away, the financial control, the isolation from friends, and finally, being locked out of my own bedroom. Mrs. Harrison, George said when I had finished, what you're describing sounds potentially like elder abuse, specifically a form of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. The words hit me like a physical blow. Abuse. I hadn't allowed myself to think of it in those terms. Surely my son wouldn't. But then I remembered the locked door, the sold car, the confiscated checkbook. I just want my house and my life back, I said quietly. And you have every right to both, George assured me. You're of sound mind and the house is solely in your name. They have no legal right to make these decisions for you or to exclude you from any part of your home. He outlined several options, from formal eviction proceedings to involving adult protective services. My stomach churned at the thought of such confrontation, but I couldn't continue as things were. Let's start with the will, I decided, and a power of attorney document naming my sister Linda instead of Derek. Then I'll consider next steps regarding the living situation. By the time I left George Brewer's office, I had signed papers removing Derek from my will and had appointments scheduled to complete the power of attorney changes. My new will would leave my house and the majority of my estate to a scholarship fund at the local community college where Harold had taught mathematics for 30 years. A smaller portion would go to Linda and her children, who had always made time for Sunday phone calls and birthday cards with handwritten notes. The taxi ride homino, not home, just the house was spent in contemplation. I wasn't naive enough to think that this legal change would solve the immediate problem of my living situation. But it had restored something essential, my sense of agency. For too long, I had allowed others to decide what was best for me. That ended today. As the taxi pulled into the driveway, I noticed Derek's car was gone, probably at work for his afternoon shift at the insurance office. Melanie's sleek SUV remained, parked where my sensible sedan used to sit. I paid the driver, adding a generous tip from the grocery money in the kitchen jar. The house was quiet when I entered, but I could hear Melanie's voice coming from the sunroom I had converted into an office space for her. She was on a video call, her professional voice carrying through the partially open door. We're already in the house, so half the battle is won, she was saying. Once we convince her to sign over the deed, we can look at those renovation plans again. The market in this neighborhood is exploding. I froze in the hallway, my hand tightening on my purse strap. No, she doesn't need that much space. We're thinking of a senior apartment complex or assisted living, much safer for someone her age. The betrayal was so complete, so breathtaking in its callousness, that for a moment I couldn't move. They weren't just controlling my life, they were planning to take my home entirely. I must have made a sound, because suddenly the video call went quiet, and Melanie's face appeared in the doorway. Eleanor, you startled me, she said, her expression quickly shifting to concern. Where have you been? We were worried. Were you? I asked, my voice distant to my own ears. Of course. Derek called from work, wondering if you'd mentioned where you were going. I had an appointment, I repeated my explanation from earlier. Next time, please let us know the details, she said, her tone one might use with a wayward teenager. At your age, we need to know where you are in case of emergencies. At my age. The condescension in those 3 words crystallized everything. I think, I said carefully, that we need to have a family meeting tonight. There are some changes I want to discuss. Melanie's smile faltered slightly. Changes? What kind of changes? About the living arrangements, I said, and about expectations going forward. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Are you feeling all right, Eleanor? You seem different. I'm feeling clearer than I have in months, I replied honestly. I'll start dinner at 6. Please make sure Derek is home by then. I walked past her, straight to my bedroom door. The lock had been changed, a small, subtle alteration. I might not have noticed if I hadn't been looking for it. Another violation. Another boundary crossed. I touched the unfamiliar keyhole, thinking of all it represented. Tonight would be difficult. There would be protests, perhaps tears and accusations. Derek might remind me of all the ways they had helped me. Melanie would express concern about my mental state or my ability to manage alone. They would leverage guilt and fear, the same tactics that had worked so well these past months. But as I stood there, hand on the door that should have opened to my sanctuary, I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Gratitude for the locked door that had finally opened my eyes. Gratitude for the clarity that came with undeniable evidence. I turned away from the bedroom and walked to the kitchen. I would prepare Harold's favorite pot roast recipe for dinner. I would set the table with the good china we had received as wedding gifts 48 years ago. And then I would reclaim what was mini-me home, my autonomy and my dignity. My son had made me sleep on the couch. It was the last night I would spend uncomfortable in my own home. And it was the last day he would count on inheriting what I had spent a lifetime building. The aroma of pot roast filled the kitchen as I peeled potatoes at the sink. My mother's hands had taught mine how to hold a paring knife, just so, to let the blade do the work. Now my hands, spotted with age and swollen at the joints, moved with the muscle memory of thousands of meals prepared. These hands had signed mortgage papers with Harold, had cradled Derek as a newborn, had recently signed papers disinheriting that same child. I heard the front door open and close, followed by Derek's voice calling out, "Something smells amazing." For a moment, I was transported back 25 years to when he would come home from high school, always hungry, always appreciative of home-cooked meals. The memory ached like an old wound. "It's pot roast," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Dinner in 30 minutes. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his work clothes, tie loosened. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble, Mom." "It's no trouble," I said, continuing with the potatoes. "I thought we could use a nice family dinner." His eyebrows rose slightly at my tone, but he just nodded and disappeared upstairs to change. I heard his and Melanie's voices, too low to make out the words, but with the unmistakable cadence of concern. They were talking about me. Good. Let them wonder. I set the table deliberately, taking out the good china that had been relegated to a high cabinet since they moved in, too delicate for everyday use. Melanie had said, replacing my dishes with their modern dishwasher-safe set. I added cloth napkins and water glasses that had been wedding gifts, small acts of reclamation. By 6:15, we were all seated, Derek and Melanie on one side of the table, their children Aiden and Emma on the other, with me at the head where Harold once sat. I had insisted on this arrangement, another small assertion of my position in this household. "This looks wonderful, Eleanor," Melanie said, her smile tight at the corners. "Thank you," I replied. "My mother taught me this recipe when I was Emma's age." 10-year-old Emma looked up from her plate. "Can you teach me to cook sometime, Grandma?" Before I could answer, Melanie jumped in. "Emma has coding club after school most days, remember? But maybe someday when you're not so busy." I met my granddaughter's eyes. "I'd love to teach you. Sunday afternoons might work well." Derek cleared his throat. "Mom mentioned she wanted to talk about some changes," he said to Melanie, cutting his meat with unnecessary force. "Yes," I said, setting down my fork. "I've been thinking about our living arrangement." "We've been thinking about that too," Melanie said quickly. In fact, we've been looking into some lovely senior communities that… I'm not moving, I interrupted, my voice firm. This is my home, and I'll be staying here. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken tensions. Derek and Melanie exchanged glances. Mom, Derek began, using the patient tone I'd grown to despise. We're concerned about you living alone, after your fall. My fall was 6 months ago, and I've healed completely, I said. What happened last night, being locked out of my own bedroom, made me realize that things can't continue as they are. That was just temporary, Melanie protested. My sister needed… I understand what you thought she needed, I cut in. What I needed was respect in my own home. I didn't receive that. What exactly are you saying, Mom? Derek asked, his expression darkening. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm saying that I want you to find your own place to live. You have 3 months. The stunned silence was broken by Melanie's nervous laugh. Eleanor, you can't be serious. Where would we go? We sold our apartment. That was your choice, I pointed out. Just as moving into my home without a proper invitation was your choice. Without an invitation? Derek's voice rose. We moved in to help you. Did I ask for help? You needed it whether you asked or not. Derek, I said, keeping my voice level despite the hammering of my heart. I appreciate that you thought you were helping. But what's happened these past months hasn't been help, it's been a slow erasure of my independence. That's ridiculous, he scoffed. We've been taking care of you. By selling my car without permission? By taking control of my finances? By isolating me from my friends? By changing the lock on my bedroom door? With each question, I watched his face change, from indignation to discomfort. Those were all for your own good, Melanie interjected. The car wasn't safe with your eyesight. My eyesight is 20/20 with my glasses, as my ophthalmologist confirmed last month. I countered. The same doctor you insisted I didn't need to see because you'd handle my medications from now on. The children were watching this exchange with wide eyes. 12-year-old Aiden leaned over to his sister and whispered something that made her nod solemnly. They were witnesses to this family fracture, and my heart ached for them even as I continued. I've spoken with an attorney, I said, and watched Derek's face pale. He confirmed what I already knew, that I am of sound mind and body, and fully capable of managing my own affairs, including deciding who lives in my home. You went to an attorney? Derek's voice was incredulous. Behind our backs? Should I have consulted you first? The way you consulted me before selling my car, or taking over my checkbook, or changing my bedroom lock? Melanie stood suddenly. Kids, go upstairs and start your homework. The adults need to talk. After the children had reluctantly departed, she turned to me, her facade of pleasantness completely gone. This is about the will, isn't it? You're afraid we're after your money. The directness of the accusation momentarily took me aback. Then I remembered her earlier conversation, which she didn't know I had overheard. Is that what you think this is about? Money? Why else would you suddenly go to an attorney? Derek demanded. I looked at my son, really looked at him, trying to reconcile this angry man with the boy who had once made me Mother's Day cards with crayon hearts. I went to an attorney because I woke up yesterday morning after sleeping on a couch in my own home, locked out of my bedroom, and realized that I had allowed myself to become a guest in the house I own. So dramatic, Melanie muttered. It was one night. It was the culmination of 6 months of having my autonomy systematically dismantled, I replied. And yes, while I was there, I did change my will. Derek's face flushed dark red. You what? I removed you as the primary beneficiary of my estate. I said, the words painful but necessary. The house and the majority of my assets will now go to establish a scholarship in your father's name at the community college. You can't do that, he sputtered. Dad wouldn't have wanted. Your father wanted me to be taken care of, I interrupted. He trusted you to honor that wish. You haven't. This is insane, Melanie said, her voice rising. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. Made me a prisoner in my own home? Isolated me from my friends? Treated me like an invalid or a child? Planned to move me to a senior community so you could take over my house completely? Her mouth snapped shut, and I knew she was wondering how I knew about that last part. I heard you on your call today, I explained, about convincing me to sign over the deed. Derek at least had the grace to look ashamed. Melanie just looked calculating, as if trying to determine how to salvage the situation. Mom, you're overreacting, Derek tried, his tone conciliatory now. We just want what's best for you. No, I said firmly. You want what's best for yourselves, and I've allowed it because I thought that's what family does, we sacrifice for each other. But I've realized there's a difference between sacrifice and surrender. I won't surrender my dignity or my home. So, you're just throwing us out? Derek's voice cracked slightly. Your own family? The guilt rose in me, familiar and almost comforting in its predictability. For a moment, I wavered. Then I thought of the locked bedroom door, of Melanie's conversation about the deed, of months of small humiliations. I'm giving you 3 months to find a new place, I said. That's more than generous. In the meantime, I'll be moving back into my bedroom tonight. And if we refuse to leave? Melanie challenged, arms crossed. Then I'll proceed with formal eviction, as my attorney has advised is my right, I answered steadily. I hope it doesn't come to that. Derek pushed back from the table, his dinner barely touched. I can't believe this. My own mother, threatening to evict me. Dad would be ashamed. The accusations stung, but I held my ground. Your father taught you to respect others, especially your elders. He would be disappointed in how you've treated me. This discussion is over, Derek announced, standing. You're clearly not thinking rationally. We'll talk again when you've calmed down. As he stormed from the room, Melanie lingered, her expression calculating. You know, I could call Adult Protective Services, she said quietly. Tell them you're making irrational decisions, that you're a danger to yourself. They might agree you need a guardian. A chill ran through me at the threat, but I met her gaze steadily. You could try, I acknowledged. But my attorney has already documented my mental competence, and my doctor will confirm it. Additionally, I've already spoken with my bridge club friends, all 6 of them, about the situation. They're aware of everything, including being told not to visit. One is a retired nurse, another a social worker. They're prepared to advocate for me. I hadn't actually done this last part yet, but watching Melanie's face fall told me it was the right thing to say. I would call Martha and the others first thing tomorrow. This isn't over, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, I agreed. You have 3 months to find a new home. But my bedroom? That's over tonight. I'll be sleeping there, not on the couch. After Melanie left, I sat alone at the table, surrounded by the half-eaten dinner and the good china that had witnessed so many family moments, happy and sad. My hands trembled slightly as I began to clear the plates. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. A small sound made me look up. Emma stood in the doorway, her expression solemn. Are you okay, Grandma? She asked quietly. I managed to smile. Yes, dear, just a difficult conversation with your parents. She came over and started helping me clear the table, her small hands carefully stacking plates. I heard some of it, she admitted. Are we really moving away? Your parents need to find your family your own home, I said gently. But that doesn't mean you won't visit, and I meant what I said about cooking lessons. She nodded, considering this. Mom says you're confused sometimes, are you? The question, so direct and innocent, brought tears to my eyes. No, sweetheart, I'm old, but my mind is clear. Sometimes people think that when you get older, you can't make decisions for yourself anymore. That's not true. I don't think you're confused, she declared, helping me load the dishwasher. You make the best cookies, and confused people can't follow recipes. I laughed despite myself, touched by her childish but sincere vote of confidence. Thank you, Emma. That means a lot to me. After Emma went upstairs, I made several phone calls. First to Martha, explaining everything and asking for her support. Then to Linda, my sister, who listened with growing outrage and immediately offered to come stay with me. Not yet, I told her. Let me handle this my way first. But knowing you're there if I need you helps more than you know. By 9 o'clock, the house had settled into an uneasy quiet. Derek and Melanie had sequestered themselves in the guest room, and the children were asleep. I gathered my nightgown and toiletries, which had been hastily stashed in the hall closet the night before, and approached my bedroom door. The new lock stared back at me, a small but significant barrier. I stood straighter and knocked firmly. Yes? Melanie's sister Angela answered, opening the door partway. I had met her only briefly when she arrived yesterday. I'll be sleeping in my room tonight, I said simply. She glanced behind her, clearly uncertain. Melanie said I could use this room. Melanie was mistaken, I replied, keeping my tone pleasant but firm. This is my bedroom, and I need it back tonight. There's a perfectly comfortable couch available. Her eyes widened slightly at my directness. I should probably talk to Melanie. This isn't Melanie's decision, I said. It's my house and my bedroom. I've given you time to gather your things, but I will be sleeping here tonight. Perhaps she heard the steel beneath my polite tone, or perhaps she simply recognized the fundamental rightness of my position. Either way, Angela nodded slowly. Give me 10 minutes to pack up, she asked. Of course, I agreed. Thank you for understanding. While I waited in the hallway, I heard footsteps approaching. Derek appeared, his expression thunderous. What are you doing? He demanded. Reclaiming my bedroom, I answered simply. Angela is a guest. And I am the homeowner, I interrupted. She can use the couch as I was expected to do. This is ridiculous, he hissed, keeping his voice low to avoid waking the children. You're acting like a child. The irony of his statement almost made me laugh. No, Derek, I'm acting like the homeowner and decision-maker that I am. The fact that you see this as childish behavior shows how completely you've dismissed my autonomy. Before he could respond, Angela emerged with her suitcase. It's fine, Derek, she said, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. I don't mind the couch for a couple nights. Derek looked like he wanted to argue further, but instead stormed off down the hallway. Angela gave me an apologetic smile and headed downstairs with her belongings. I entered my bedroomy sanctuary and closed the door firmly behind me. The familiar space had been subtly altered. My reading chair moved, my bedside table rearranged, my pillows not as I liked them. Small changes that symbolized the larger invasion. Methodically, I restored the room to my preferences. I moved the chair back to its place by the window where the morning light was best for reading. I arranged my pillows as I liked them, returned my reading glasses and book to the bedside table, and placed the framed photo of Harold and me back in its rightful spot. As I settled into bed that night, in the space that had been mine for decades, I felt both victorious and deeply sad. The relationship with my son had fundamentally changed, perhaps irrevocably. But I had also reclaimed something precious, my dignity and self-determination. The following weeks were tense but productive. True to my word, I called my bridge club friends and explained everything. They rallied around me immediately, resuming our regular visits and providing moral support. Martha, a retired social worker, helped me document the changes that had occurred since Derek and his family moved in, creating a record in case I needed it later. Linda visited for a week, her presence a buffer against the chilly atmosphere in the house. Derek and Melanie spoke to me only when necessary, but I noticed they began returning small freedoms. My checkbook reappeared in my desk drawer. The grocery money jar disappeared, replaced by access to my own accounts again. I met again with George Brewer, my attorney, who helped me draft a formal notice for Derek and Melanie, giving them the 3-month timeline in writing. He also helped me create a new power of attorney document naming Linda as my healthcare proxy and financial decision maker should I become incapacitated. This is the right decision, George assured me during our meeting. And a brave one. Many older adults find it difficult to assert boundaries with adult children who've overstepped. It doesn't feel brave, I admitted. It feels necessary but heartbreaking. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, he observed kindly. By the 6-week mark, Derek and Melanie had begun house hunting. I overheard their discussions not by eavesdropping, but because they made little effort to keep their voices down when talking about the impossible situation I had put them in. "She'll regret this when she needs full-time care," Melanie said one evening as they scrolled through real estate listings. "Who does she think will take care of her then?" "She's made her choice," Derek responded, his voice hard. "She chose her house over her family." The mischaracterization stung, but I resisted the urge to defend myself. Time and space might eventually allow for healing, but for now, the boundaries needed to remain firm. Emma continued to seek me out, asking for the promised cooking lessons. We started with simple cookies, then moved to bread, and finally, a full Sunday dinner. These moments were precious islands of normalcy in the sea of tension. Even Aiden occasionally joined us, particularly when chocolate chip cookies were involved. "Will we still see you after we move?" Emma asked one Sunday as we kneaded bread dough together. "Of course," I assured her. "You'll always be welcome here to visit, and maybe you can stay overnight sometimes too." She nodded, her small hands mimicking my movements with the dough. I told Mom that, but she said we'll be too busy in the new house. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults say things when they're upset that they don't really mean. We'll figure it out together. By the end of the 3 months, Derek and Melanie had found a house in a neighboring suburb not as spacious as mine, but modern and well located near the children's schools. The moving day was subdued, with boxes and furniture loaded efficiently by hired movers. I stood in the doorway, watching as the last items were carried out. Derek approached me, his expression unreadable. "I hope you're satisfied," he said, his voice low. "This is what you wanted." "What I wanted was to be treated with respect in my own home," I replied. "I hope someday you'll understand that." He shook his head. "You chose your pride over your family." "No, Derek. I chose my dignity and independence, which I have every right to maintain. That doesn't mean I don't love you and the children." His expression softened slightly. "The kids want to know if they can still see you." "They will always be welcome here," I said firmly. "And so will you, when you're ready to treat me as an equal, not someone to be managed." He didn't respond to that, just nodded curtly and walked to the waiting car where Melanie and the children sat. Emma waved enthusiastically through the window, and Aiden gave a smaller wave beside her. I returned their waves, blinking back tears as the car pulled away. The house felt enormously empty that first night. I walked through the rooms, noticing spaces where their furniture had been, marks on the walls where their pictures had hung. For a brief, dark moment, I questioned my decision. Had I been too harsh, too unyielding? Then I saw my knitting basket beside my reading chair, exactly where I liked it. My garden tools arranged on the potting bench in the garage, ready for spring planting. My checkbook in my desk drawer, my car keys on their hook by the door. Small freedoms, essential dignities. I picked up the phone and called Linda. "They're gone," I told her when she answered. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Sad, I admitted, but also at peace. You did the right thing, Ellie, she assured me, and the door isn't closed forever. Derek will come around eventually. Maybe, I said, not entirely convinced. But even if he doesn't, I've shown my grandchildren something important, that age doesn't diminish your right to respect and dignity. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emma standing there with Aiden, both holding school backpacks. Grandma! Emma exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. Dad dropped us off. He said we could stay until dinner if that's okay with you. We have homework, but after, can we bake cookies? Over their heads, I saw Derek's car at the curb. He didn't get out, just gave a small nod when our eyes met. It wasn't forgiveness or understanding, not yet, but it was a beginning. Cookies after homework sounds perfect, I told the children, ushering them inside. And maybe you can stay for dinner too. I'll call your dad later to arrange it. As I closed the door, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would not be easy, and the relationship with my son would need time to heal if it ever could completely. But I had reclaimed my home and my autonomy. I had shown that elder abuse, even the subtle kind dressed up as concern, was not something I would tolerate. My son had made me sleep on the couch, thinking my age made me compliant and forgettable. Instead, it had awakened in me a fierce determination to protect what was mine, me home, my dignity, and my right to make my own choices. He would never sit in my will again, but perhaps someday he would sit at my table as an equal, with mutual respect restored. Until then, I had cookies to bake with my grandchildren, a garden to tend, and a life to live on my own terms, all 72 years of hard-earned wisdom behind me, and however many years of independence ahead.